How big a deal is AI? Will it replace jobs or merely augment them? What kinds of tasks can AI handle effectively? Perhaps most importantly, how can we unlearn old ways of doing things so we can effectively relearn how to leverage this powerful technology? Find out more on this episode of Future Proof.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Yours truly, Eric Cavanaugh, is here with the legendary entrepreneur, the man about, I'd say the man about town. He's the man about the world. He's all over the place, Shanghai, Malaysia, doing amazing things in the world of modern technology. We have Alvin Fu. His latest gig, 02 launch, is about 3 years old now, and he knows a lot about Bitcoin, knows a lot about enterprise technology, and really global market trends. And Alvin, I'll just throw it over to you first. We are living in fascinating times right now. And when I look at these foundational models that are coming out, what I find so fascinating is that they are, in many senses, a reflection of human knowledge. It's like a dynamic Encyclopedia Britannica that gets things wrong sometimes. They're still hallucinating a bit, and we're all working on that. We're working on the ground truth. But you just suddenly have at your fingertips outrageous amounts of information, which can be shared and articulated in perfectly syntactically correct sentences. That's a really big deal. What are your thoughts, having been in the industry for a couple decades now or more? What are your thoughts about this inflection point we're facing right now?
Well, Eric, thanks again for inviting me to your show. Well, we are living in exciting times. Something that I've never. I mean, we grew up. I think we probably grew up almost at the same era where we saw, everything that was analog, right? You mentioned Britannica, Encyclopedia,
Right.
you know, things
That's right.
that I think kids of today don't even know what in the world is encyclopedia, because now they have access to the internet, and now of course with AI, chat GPT, the world is rapidly moving towards an era where nobody can comprehend, and the speeds will only get faster and faster. And AI, I think, is going to be the tool, or the single biggest, to me, is the biggest denominator that's going to disrupt every single business in every category, every industry, and possibly our lives as well. So we
Yeah.
are definitely living in exciting times, and I think it's just going to get much faster. And we just have to accept. And I always coin this term. We live in an era where we need to learn very quickly. We also need to unlearn what we have learned very quickly, so that we can relearn new things. Because I think that is the only way to stay relevant or staying ahead of the game.
That's a
And
really,
and
yeah, that's a really good point. We have to unlearn to relearn. It kind of reminds me of one of the challenges with these models. So Watson X, I'm told, was designed originally such that you could pull out a data set and then retrain the model. And I'm sure they did that because they realized we might load something in and then realize, oh, we shouldn't have done that, take it back out. Well, most of these other models are not built like that. And once you train a model on something, it's very hard to untrain it. And the example I give is like raising kids. If you curse in front of your 2-year-old, don't be surprised if she curses back because that's now in her model, right? So it's hard to, you can try, like with your RAG model, you can try now, don't curse. Only daddy can say that word. Good luck with that one. Right? What do you think about that?
right, I mean, the it's easier said than done. I mean, learning, I think, is given. Everyone learns something, right? To unlearn what they have learned, that's difficult.
Right.
And if you look at, these days, when you talk about, maybe 20 years ago, when you tell people that you have got like 20, 30 years of work experience, that means a lot, right? That's valuable, right?
Hmm.
But 20 years to 30 years of work experience in today's world, that's not going to be helpful. And because you're going to come with legacy, right? Lots of baggages, and it's difficult to learn something new. And let's not even talk about learning something new. To unlearn what you have learned for the last 20, 30 years, difficult.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of companies, when you look at how they are moving forward, what they have been organized to achieve past success, right? It's probably going to make, probably going to be very difficult for them to move forward because of the legacy, right? Because it's very hard for a company that's been around for 50 years, 100 years, right, to unlearn, to uncheck themselves, right, and reorganize them again in a way that is totally not what they're used to. So unlearning is actually a lot harder. Relearning is probably, but you need to unlearn first before you can relearn. So again, in that context, while it all seems easy, it's not so simple after all. But so this is something I practice all the time, and I'm not so young, but I've learned how to, sometimes dump out all the legacy, and trying to keep an open mind. Now, keeping an open mind is also easier said than done. Yeah. Now, while you want to keep an open mind, but you're still structured within a framework.
Right.
So that's why when I always talk about, when people always say, let's think out of the box, right? But the truth is that it's very difficult, because if you're getting the same people who have been in the same industry for 20, 30 years, and asking him to think out of the box is almost next to impossible. The only way to think out of the box, right, is to get someone not from the same industry, right, to look in and figure out how to think out of that industry.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
so
And
someone like, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was going to say you're bringing up a lot of really good points here. And from an organizational perspective, I think you're going to need a lot of introspection and then some extrospection, I suppose. And as you suggest, get someone to come in from outside the organization and just look at your plan, look at your vision. I have a really good friend who is a developer. He's been doing this stuff for 20 odd years in the Valley in San Francisco, and he has a really interesting mantra where he says busy is the enemy of creative. And what he means is if you're just constantly behind the eight ball, if you're constantly trudging away, you're not thinking of creative answers. And especially in the coding world and the information architecture world, there are no limits to how you can design something these days. And I think a lot of people who don't know code don't realize how constrictive it is in terms of how you have to write things. You have different ways, different architectures, calling, you have, of course, modular architectures, you have monolithic, you now have all these distributed systems like Kubernetes. My point is that there are countless ways to reinvent how you're doing things, but it does require that sort of shedding of the old mindsets. And that's what you're talking about, right? Is being able to really thoughtfully discard the structures of your thinking to adopt a new way of living and doing. What do you think?
Well, I can resonate. I mean, the thing is that now I work with developers. I'm not a coder. And by practice, I'm supposed to be practicing law. I actually graduated with a law degree some 30 years ago. Uh, and my first job was, I actually started off in an advertising industry. So nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with whatever that I'm doing right now. So it has gone through an evolution that I got into internet and gradually understand networking, and then understand 1.0, 2.0, and subsequently trying to understand and have a much better grasp in Web 3.0. So the entire evolution has taken, some 25 years or more, right? To learn, unlearn, and also relearn. And and when I work with my coders, now my coders are so big into their way of working, right? Therefore, whatever they think about is always, the practicality and how you code. But when I work with them, I don't think so much of coding. I think of user experience. I think more in terms of the practicality and the application, and how would that then adapt and adapt to the real world, right? So that's why when we look for people within a team, we want to find a good combination. a combination of someone who can code very well and who are also very receptive. Because the problems with a lot of coders is that they're not so receptive, and they're always stuck, right? Stuck within their square, and then the thinking is that they're always stuck there and not willing to move beyond. So we need to find a good combination. Coders who are CTO who are very open minded, and then we have got product person who understand product very well and user experience and the customers. So that's a good combination. If you look at most successful startup, they are made up of combination of people who are really good in their own domain and who are very, very receptive. Because in today's world, right, it's all about understanding your customer. If you understand them and being able to execute right according to what they need, right, and that makes the product very successful. And that's lacking in a lot of companies because some of them are just good engineers, they're good programmers, and that's all about it. But to understand the customer and take it to market, sometimes lacking, right? So again, when you want to find a team, right, you need to find a team that are able to do what I've just said. But if you look at most organizations, I'm talking about multinationals, the companies that has been around for a long time, the combination are actually missing. And most of the time, these are being led by people who has been in the industry, right, for several years. And even if they find replacement for the CEO or CFO, usually they will end up finding the old guys from another company, a similar company, to run the company, because it's safe to do so, right? Because if you find someone who is new, right, that's taking a lot of risk, right? For a new startup, it's a lot easier because there's no legacy, there's no historical. So basically, you're starting from ground zero. But when you are taking on a multinational, there are a lot of boundaries that you need to work within, and then you're answerable to your shareholders, your board of directors, and so forth. So it's very difficult. So that's what you're seeing right now. We have seen over the last 20 years, there disruption in several sector industry, and many big companies that was once very big are no longer around, like companies like Kodak, companies like Nokia. And now what is impacting is in what we are seeing very clearly is in the auto industry. When you look what you're seeing right now, the EVs from China are now disrupting, right, the global auto industry, because the auto industry, which has been so structured and organized, right, to a very well structured supply chain for the last God knows how many years, right, are now facing disruption caused by companies, new EV companies that built cars entirely on their own. They design and manufacture a car entirely by themselves in a shortest time. If you look at most companies that design car, it takes 7 years, right? At least 7 to 10 years to come up with one new model. Now, the company in China, a company called BYD, as I'm sure you must have heard, one of the largest EV company, they can come up with a new model almost every month,
Holy
right?
cow.
That's that's scary, right? So the Chinese manufacturing, right, has, I mean, whatever I always say this, right, now anything that is has a linkage to electronics, right, whether that's a smartphone or the fan that you're using at home, the air conditioning system, whatever that's being powered by electric, the Chinese are really good at it, right? Years before EV came about, the Chinese had a hard time catching up because it was based on a very old technology called engine, the combustion engine. Today, right, it is being built and powered by batteries. So that's electric again. So the electrification of the auto industry, right, provides, right, a new entire paradigm shift for the auto manufacturing industry in China. And suddenly, right, they have gone from nowhere and became the largest EV manufacturers in the world, right?
Wow.
So they've disrupted many industry, right? And the auto industry is the next one to be hit. Yeah. So when you look at a lot of these companies, I mean, I had the opportunity to speak to some of them, some of the CEO that I know personally, and most of them started the company almost nothing, literally almost nothing, with a couple of people, and all they had was a dream that they want to build a car.
Talking to Alvin Fu, your host here, Eric Kavanaugh. We're talking all about innovation and how China has 165 manufacturing companies for cars. I mean, that's just crazy. Here in America, they talk about the big three, and even they're having trouble, and they've been subsidized and given all sorts of money. And I drive a Mazda Miata myself, 2001, a six-speed. It's a beautiful car. I don't think there'll ever be another car as beautiful as my car, to be honest, but I'm selfish. But Alvin, you are a lawyer by trade. You studied law, and I just gave a keynote this morning where I basically said in the not too distant future, and this may already be happening somewhere around the world, you as a plaintiff are going to have the option to go with an AI judge and jury or a real judge and jury. And if you do the AI judge and jury, you're just going to load your lawsuits. You're going to load all your evidence. You're going to talk to a camera for an hour or two and answer questions. The defendant's going to do the same thing. And once all that information is in there, the engine's going to go brrrr, read through it and say, we find in favor of the plaintiff. Here's what you have to do. I think that's going to happen. And think about this, because you can even with the ability to model these days, you talk about a jury of your peers, you could scrape data from Facebook, from Instagram, from other social platforms in a particular geography, and then create jurors based upon the personalities in that geography. Then you could even have a random jury selection. You could do the whole thing through AI. And you look at the legal world today. Well, what does law really boil down to? It boils down to the practice, the rules, and what you can do at certain points in time. A motion to dismiss, for example, is something you can do. Well, right now you got to pay people a lot of money to do all that stuff, and they have to know how to do it. Then you have to get them to do it. And I've had only one experience with a lawyer in my life, and he was very lazy. I mean, we worked out, everything worked out fine, but he was very lazy and he just didn't really care. And that's when I learned, oh man, when you hire a lawyer, make sure you get one who's going to actually work for you and care about your case, because even that's difficult. But what do you think about this prediction that AI is going to revolutionize jurisprudence?
Well, I think AI is not just going to replace the current legal system. Potentially, it's going to also revolutionize the healthcare industry and so many other industry, right? Uh, now, now going back to what you have just said, right? I do believe in a very very near future you're going to have a situation where it's going to be an AI judge. It's going to be an AI lawyer. I mean, it's doable because you can machine train them. You can and they can continue learning, right?
Right.
And you and the thing is that now they can work 24 hours a day. A
Right.
human cannot work 24 hours a day,
That's right.
and they will know everything. The
Right.
judges and the lawyers will know some of the stuff well, but not everything. But your AI judge will know everything, every single statutory law, all the precedents and so forth, right? So he's going to be a much more knowledgeable lawyer. Now, but having said that, right, there is one part of the legal system of law that requires some deep some critical thinking, especially into the facts of the case. Now, what the law you can change, but the facts of a case, right, sometimes can be very subjective.
Hmm.
I think this is where uh, I'm not saying human will play a better role, but certainly human can think better. Right now, as far as the next 5-10 years, right, until really it comes a day where AGI is becomes a reality, where you can't even outcompete or even outtalk an AI. I think that's where AGI comes in, right?
Hmm.
But I think in a short period of time, you're going to get AI lawyers, AI judges, but they are just going to play. They're going to play a very elementary role of a judge, right? So basically, very simple cases, right? Very straightforward cases, right? I think for cases that require there's more that requires critical thinking, and or even on appeal cases, right, that you probably need, right, a human judge, right. I don't think this would they would be replaced in the far in the future, but at least I think the magistrate court, the very low level judges will likely be replaced by AI,
Hmm.
including very low level lawyers as well.
Yeah.
It's
I think
similarly, yeah,
right,
similarly to the healthcare and medical Medicare,
right,
where the GPs are going to be replaced,
right.
right? What's going to be left, right, are the specialists, because what people want to talk to, they want to talk to specialists, they want to talk to experts, right? But AI can do that's very straightforward jobs. So I think
Mhm.
that's where AI is going to play a huge role in replacing very general roles, even
Yeah.
for lawyers and doctors.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you what, one other topic I'd love to get your opinion on is transparency. So OpenAI originally was open and now it's a black box. So I joke they should change their name to closed AI because they're not open anymore. But there is this Olmo that just came out, which is true open source, and they even give you access to the training data. And for my mind, I believe transparency will be crucial for auditability and for fairness with these models because if they're not transparent, if they are a true black box, then there's no real way to audit them. And truth be told, the complexity of these things is so tremendous that even if it's completely open source, it's still not like the average person could come along and understand what the heck it's doing. These are very, very, very complex systems, and they're all different. I try to explain that there is no limit to the number of ways you can set up a deep learning module, how you define the parameters, how many parameters you have, how many inference layers you have. You could even make them dynamic. So there's no limit to how complex they can be. Not that complexity necessarily equals better value or better efficiency, because it doesn't. That's why I think these small language models are going to become fairly prevalent. But what do you think about transparency in code and architecture? I know that goes against the grain of traditional capitalist thinking with intellectual property, but let's face it, these models have kind of they've absorbed all this intellectual property and then now they have it trained in their systems. So it's like, is IP even a thing anymore? What do you think about legislation to mandate that AI models be transparent in their code and in their training data?
I think the regulation around this area is coming. And I think we need regulation around it, because if not, right, then how do you define transparent?
Right.
So what is transparency, and how much is being transparent,
Right.
right? And the models that you just talk about, what 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 can be defined as a good model? And that's the same problem that Elon Musk was saying, that if you want to build an AI model, then you got to make sure that whatever that you input into the model is making sure there's a lot of truth to it,
Right. That's
because
right.
it's all about truth, right?
Right.
And if you only teach or input models and data that you want it to model that way, then it becomes biased. Right now, imagine if the lawyers are being the AI lawyers or AI doctors they are being skewed towards the pharmaceutical industry, just like
Right.
how the
Right.
pharma companies are lobbying the government. Can
Right.
you imagine, right, that the AI doctors or AI lawyers are being skewed biased, right? And that will not work for all of us, right?
Right.
So what you teach the model, right? I think that needs to be defined. Right now, there's no regulation, and also because it's we're moving so fast, right? And as I'm sure you know, regulation always play a catch up role,
Right.
just like how it's playing a catch up role into digital asset. It's also playing a catch up role to AI, and everyone's trying to learn. And as much as we are trying to understand this better, you know, the transparency, privacy, cybersecurity, and so forth. Right? There's so many areas, and even copyrights. When we look at generative AI, every single image that's being generated on generative AI is a copy of something else,
Right.
right? And usually, that's something else being optimized, but through AI, right? So, what what levels of optimization, right, that you need to do before it becomes a new image or a new copyrighted material? So right now, nobody has a definition. So basically, what we are all doing is copying each other,
Right.
right?
Right.
And it could be an image of a cartoon on a Disney,
Right.
or that could be a copyright of Marvel and whatever that may be. So we all taking these images, right, and then repurpose them. But what about copyright? So I think regulations will catch up, and we need one, because if we don't have one, right, then which standard and which standard are we following?
Right.
And what is right to you may not be right to me, or what's right to one country may not be right to another. So I think they need to put this in place, so at least there's a more defined role and as to how you train your model and what's transparency,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I think that that's an
Otherwise,
excellent
then all
point.
the AI. Yeah,
Right.
go ahead.
Right. It's just up for grabs. I mean, if there are no rules, or if there, and here's the other side of the equation. I've got a very colorful history, and for a couple years, I worked for a Russian. I often do my Russian imitation. I worked for Alexander Kananikin, Whiskey, the post-Soviet Russia, and he was Boris Yeltsin's financier. And he tells me stories that basically way back in the day, in what, the 1980s, 1990s, basically he said from his perspective, and he became a multimillionaire by like the age of 24, 25, because he got into the construction business and he did commodities trading at the very beginning of the internet. So if you can see that lumber is 1 ruble a pound over here and 10 over there, well, buy, sell. And he did that before, and so he had a first mover advantage basically. But one thing he told me that I thought was very interesting was that the system back then in Russia was set up so that you could not steal. That's how he described it. But you weren't supposed to steal you weren't supposed to steal more than your boss, right? Like the senior director can steal a lot, the manager can steal a little bit, the new guy better not steal very much. And this is what he tells me, right? And then what I picked up on, which I thought was very interesting, was that the laws were so complex. And I'll tell you what, this goes back to Lao Tzu, because I love Chinese philosophy. Lao Tzu said 3,000 years ago, when the laws are complex, the bandits will abound. And his point was that bad guys love very complicated law because they can navigate it, they can understand it, they can take advantage of it. And I think that getting back to this AI overthrow that I'm talking about, when you see this permeate the legal industry, healthcare industry, financial services, et cetera, it's good for the bad guys, but it's hopefully good for the good guys. And I think we can start to unwind some of that stuff because from a prosecutorial perspective, if everyone's breaking the law all the time, then you can be very selective on who you prosecute. And that is a bastardization of the law and the whole point of having laws, right?
Right.
So, what do you think about that in general? Because I think that we have to get back to basics. And I'll give you one last fun quote. When I described this to my business partner, Dr. Robin Bloor, who is a very, very intelligent guy, a British man, I explained this to him years ago. He goes, "Do you know how many rules Napoleon had?" I was like, "No." He said, "7." And he was talking about going back to basics, going back to first principles. And I think we kind of need that because it's like things have gotten so complex now from many different perspectives that we have to distill in order to be able to govern effectively in the future. We're going to have to distill it down to core values and rethink all these processes for how we do things. But what do you think?
Right. Well, if you look at most profession, right, or whether that's going to be the medical profession, the financial industry, or even laws, it's actually quite complex. And I think they are complex for a reason. They are complex because then everyone has a job,
Mm.
right? Now, everyone get to keep their job, right? And if you look at the financial sector, it's so complex to the point that the regular guy on the street, right, will not understand that they need a wealth advisor, that they need someone to advise them what to do, right? And that's why there's a lot of roles and jobs